program. So good afternoon and welcome. My name is Caroline and I am the manager of tours and public programs at the Frye Art Museum. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am joining you from today is the territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish and Suquamish tribes, who have since time immemorial stewarded the lands and waters of this place we now call Seattle. Please join me in offering gratitude to their elders past and present, as well as future generations for their stewardship. So I'm delighted to welcome you to our second Perspectives discussion. This is presented in conjunction with the Frye Art Museum's current exhibition, which is titled Human Nature, Animal Culture, Selections from the Frye Art Museum Collection. This exhibition focuses on portrayals of domesticated animals from the Frye's collection as a way to examine how human-animal relations have shifted over time and to reflect upon the role art plays in mediating our relationships with animals more broadly. The Perspective series in particular invites local community members to interpret a work of art from the exhibition through their own distinct lens. Some of you may have joined us in fall of 2022 when Peter Zoller, who's the Vice President of Conservation Initiatives at the Woodland Park Zoo, spoke about his work researching the great mountain goats and sheep of the Himalayas. Today's facilitator, Masra Clamoungou, will take you behind the art into his perspectives on the human-animal connection through some of his experiences working with and raising farm animals. But before we welcome Masra, we'd like to take a moment for all of us to explore one of the artworks together. So I will share my screen again, and we'll look at art together. When we stand in front of an artwork as educators, we often ask visitors first, what is going on in this work of art? So we see this series as an opportunity to elevate these voices and viewpoints by asking our guest facilitators, what do you see? So to begin, I'd like to find out what you all see when we look at a work of art. So I will start by giving you a quiet moment just to look at this piece and observe. I'll ask a few questions to guide your looking, and then we'll turn it over to Masra. So as a reminder, there are no right or wrong answers. It's really about what you notice or experience when looking. So I'll give you a quiet moment now. All right, thank you for taking a moment. So the first question I'm going to ask, and I do encourage you to send your responses in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you prefer. So what are you noticing? No right or wrong answers. Dakota, heritage, care, life, culture. I love that. Meisha, bondage. Noticing that our animals here are tied. What more are we noticing? Harriet, tethered, domesticated with a question mark. So yeah, noticing again that there is kind of an influence of domestication or maybe of human life tied to these animals. Chris, I want to know what the cows are looking at. It's a great question. It's actually going to come up soon too. Tapoa, if I'm saying that correctly, the cows are intently gazing into the distance, thinking about their personalities. So great responses. Anne is noticing the calm water. So we do, expanding from our kind of animal subjects, there's a calm water in the background. Merlin, the animals look like they're anticipating getting on the barge, maybe sadly. So wondering kind of what the feeling of this image is. We see some sort of built structure, maybe a barge, and perhaps thinking that the animals might be going in that direction, and perhaps they're sad. Texture, touchable. Oh, I like that, Gail. So thinking about like the actual process of making this work of art and looking that if we could actually touch it, which would be so fun one day, what that would feel like. Or thinking about perhaps the texture of the animals themselves if we're in this scene. Ella, thinking about the purpose of the animals, so thinking about beef or dairy. So again, thinking about that human influence of not just the animals existing as they are now, but thinking about how that human-animal relationship is playing out. Ella, how important they are for the family. Yep. Great comments, trying to keep up. Calm scene, including the cows. So a sense of calm is what you're noticing. Ella, that there is love for the animals and honor of them. Dakota, milk and cream, butter and cheese. And wondering what will happen next. Wonderful. So proving that just a simple image of two cows, of two animals, has a lot to dig out from it. So a question of what might these animals be doing? We did some of us touched on that. So we noticed that they are kind of attached to something. So thinking that there is some sort of domestication or relationship between humans that we don't necessarily see and the animals themselves. So any other ideas of what our animals might be doing? And resting. That's great. And waiting. Some folks are saying waiting. And so a common question we'll ask is, what do you see that makes you say that? And so perhaps we're noticing that their hooves or their legs are kind of at rest. There's not an action going on. They're also tied, so we know they can't go too far. Waiting for care. They look like they're in line. So kind of, again, like maybe a manipulation of sorts. They're in the shade near the water. To be milked and to be hitched to a wagon. Great observations. So then one last question I will ask, and someone did notice this before or asked about this before, is what could be happening outside this frame? Oh, I like that. Hoping for apples. So what could be happening in what we don't see in this scene? Layla, thinking that there might be a path through a forest. So wondering what the landscape looks like outside of here. Fruit growing, birds singing, children playing from Dakota. So thinking about maybe the community that surrounds this space. Potential waiting to be loaded for market. The barge is being loaded and the cows will pull it. Caretakers busy with something else. So we did kind of notice that there seems to be a human-animal relationship here. And so wondering maybe those humans are just outside this frame. Caretakers coming back. Humans taking a break. The cows are at rest, but there could be lots of action around them, loading the barge, etc. Yeah, so thinking about what kind of industry is operating in this space. So maybe it's a busy town outside of here and we're just catching this brief moment of respite for the animals. Harriet, yes, the water is moving. So it spreads across our scene here too. Well, thank you so much for exploring this work with us for a little bit just to start. But let's get into kind of the most fun stuff. But I appreciate your observation. So I am delighted that I get to introduce Masra Clamoungou, who is the farm manager at Small Axe Farm, a farm site operated by the Black Farmers Collective. Masra has spent the last 5 years studying and working in the field of sustainable agriculture and food systems. Born and raised in South Seattle, Masra began his farming career in earnest with the Seattle Youth Garden Works program, working on a mid-sized urban farm on the UW campus. He now farms at Small Axe with the Black Farmers Collective and raises pastured pork. Up until the COVID-19 pandemic, Masra was attending a BA program in sustainable agriculture at Sterling College in rural Kentucky. It was here where he was first introduced to working with, learning from, and raising larger farm animals. So please join me in welcoming Masra.
Hello, hello. Thank you for that great introduction, Caroline. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, and thanks everybody for your thoughtful responses. I saw much of the same in the oxen photo and the oxen painting. And yeah, I wonder, can we pull that up again? That's great. Yep. So yeah, I guess I'll go over just a quick visual analysis of some of the things that I noticed, what I was thinking about while looking at the painting. And much of it was said by the participants already, but yeah, I think one of the main things I noticed is someone mentioned bondage, right? And I see the halter over the mouths on the heads of the oxen, of the cows, and so yeah, that reminds me of working with draft animals, because that's that halter is an essential part of the manipulation, the movement of the animals, and working with them. And yeah, and also what I thought was possibly going on outside of the frame was, yeah, either the cows are coming from somewhere, coming from a barn, coming from a farm somewhere to either load that barge onto the river, or they're getting ready to pull whatever was unloaded off of that barge, and maybe they're getting ready to they're watching their human off of the frame, loading a cart, loading a wagon for them to later be hitched on, as well. So yeah, it's sort of the visual aspects that I noticed from the painting. Also, one thing that actually really stood out to me when I first looked at the painting was that you can see the cow in the front has, if you look really closely, you can see that there's actually udders on the cow, so that tells me that's a female cow, which is I think somewhat contradictory, because I think the painting's title, Oxen, Two Cows, and technically what I learned in Kentucky and from working with the draft animals is that an oxen is actually technically characterized as a male castrated bull, so that's used as a draft animal to pull plows or to pull heavy loads. So that was a little contradiction or interesting element that may not have been taken into account by the artist, or by the later naming of the painting. Yeah, maybe it's lost in translation as well. But yeah, so that was my quick visual analysis of the cows getting ready to load, maybe watching their human off of the frame, getting ready to load on or off of the barge. But yeah, and sort of, I guess, coming back to my perspective, my personal perspective, what this painting largely reminds me of is my experiences in Kentucky. I was attending the Wendellberry farming program, which is a program through Sterling College, and a big aspect of that program was teaching new farmers how to work with draft animals, and how to work with draft animals and how to farm sustainably with draft animals, because particularly in that area of Kentucky where I was, there was a long history of working with draft animals, oxen, mules in particular, that the faculty of the program and some of the farmers in the area really wanted to preserve and to keep on passing those skills to future generations. And that was a whole new aspect of farming for me, with that I was excited to learn more about. Because I grew up, as I mentioned in the bios, I grew up in South Seattle in the city. So I never really had much exposure to farming or larger animal agriculture. I was introduced to the farming that I'm farming right now, which is like sort of just market vegetable farming and bringing vegetables into the city, growing and bringing vegetables into the city, and not really dealing with large animals, cows, and dealing with like pasture, looking at grass systems and pasture management systems and all of that, which I got a chance to take a peek at in Kentucky. But yeah, the main, and just like one thing I remarked at in that program was just that it was my first experience being around like a large animals in general, being around like a 1,200 plus pound cow, or was just a very like a whole, it's like sort of a, I don't know what's the word, but like a really all encompassing experience. Just like being around the majesty and the grace of a huge animal that that is so powerful and can cause much damage if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yeah, but going off of that, one thing I am grateful for having access to that program is, I mentioned a bit earlier, just learning about a different type of agriculture. And I think just on a wider level, just a whole nother base of knowledge that I wouldn't have access to or really known about if I stayed in the city, if I stayed just with the vegetable growing that I've done. Is just that depth of knowledge that's in rural country areas, that deals with working with animals, that deals with like some of the hands-on skills that come with working with animals, and some of the background knowledge that comes with working with animals. Is like, particularly one thing that stood out to me was like the depth of language that can be found while working with animals. In particular, thinking about oxen, obviously, it's like maybe like a jargon term in terms of like animal husbandry, but there's this I guess one thing that stood out to me is that there's just so many different ways to call a cow. It's like there's heifers, which are female cows that haven't had a calf yet, and there's like feeders, and then there's steer, which are male cows, and bulls, which are obviously male breeding cows. And then with every other species of farm animal, there are specific terms to describe whatever like what aspect of the life cycle that this animal is in, or what their sex is, and what their use in relation to humans is. So like there's, for like goats, there's like billies and does. For pigs in particular, there's sows, there's barrows, gilts, feeders, weaners, and all of that. So yeah, that's just one little point about like the depth of knowledge that's available, that's in these rural spaces, that that really stood out to me. And also sort of going off that depth of knowledge, I mentioned like the hands-on working knowledge and the working techniques that are that I think can come, that just, what am I saying, that can come like as a second nature to people who have grown up in the country, grown up in rural communities. And that's like, I guess I seem like knowing how to like knowing a person's way around a rope, and like how to tie knots, and what knots make sense in different applications, for like, for example, tying a halter to the cows, when to the oxen when you're putting them up to rest, or when you're putting them just to stay place while for example you're loading a wagon, or loading something for them to pull them. And yeah, and then this basic other hands-on stuff is like loading a trailer and all that, which is maybe a bit more modern. Like, yeah, loading and hitching a trailer correctly. That's all the stuff that sort of I've enjoyed picking up the knowledge about and learning from being out of there. And yeah, and sort of, I guess, also zooming out to, I guess, a more abstract point that I want to make is just like the importance of the urban-rural connection. That was something I was thinking about a lot as I was actually applying to this program through Sterling College, and yeah, when thinking about what I want to learn in my farming career as I progress towards it, and yeah, I mentioned this. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but yeah, I wanted to have an exposure to a different type of farming than what I was used to being in and around Seattle, which was, I just mentioned, growing market vegetables and not having access or not having exposure to larger agricultural systems and larger animals. So yeah, and that sort of leads me to, I guess, talk a little bit about agricultural land and access to land. I'm lucky enough to be part of the Black Farmers Collective and be farming right now in the Sammamish Valley up in Woodinville, Redmond area, about 45 minutes north of Seattle. And we're farming on a King County plot, but yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at the questions. That leads me to talk about, I guess, one organization I think is that I want to highlight is called Friends of Sammamish Valley, and they are a nonprofit organization put together to really help and preserve and support agricultural land in the Sammamish Valley, because we're under a lot of development pressure from housing and wine businesses and beverage ordinances as well. But yeah, there's Friends of Sammamish Valley is a great organization doing a lot of work to support farmers in the Sammamish Valley, and I think just want to highlight those folks. And yeah, I think that's most of the points that I want to make. I think about this painting. If there are any questions sort of around this painting, I can answer some of those, and if not, we can I'll be down to move on to our next painting.
Masra, I'm wondering if we can just address Gail's question in the chat. So, do you see working with draft animals as a viable option for the type of farming you are currently doing?
Yeah, I think definitely draft animals are definitely applicable in the type of market farming, market gardening that I'm doing right now. Practically, like I wouldn't say it would be viable to start farming with draft animals right now in the situation we are, but there are many market vegetable farms who do use draft animals, draft horses, oxen to prepare their fields to pull heavy loads and to work on the farm. Yeah, I think we're lucky enough as Black Farmers Collective to have a tractor and to be able to use that. I say, I guess I'm hesitant to say that yes, because it's a lot of different infrastructure and knowledge around animal husbandry and raising animals, and we're on leased land in the Sammamish Valley. So, but yes, it's definitely viable for market vegetable farming.
Great. And then this might be a great transition to the next work that we are going to look at. So from Raymond, how did this experience lead you to raising pigs? And I think it was kind of about Black Farmers Collective and then the work you're doing with Friends of Sammamish Valley.
Yeah, for sure. So how it got me to raising pigs. So as I mentioned, I was attending this Wendellberry farming program in Kentucky through Sterling College, and I was actually, I believe I was in my junior year. I don't, time is weird, but going into my senior year, I was looking at doing a senior year research project, and what I was looking at doing is actually raising a small batch of pigs on the farm out there. And so yeah, I was preparing for that, doing all the research and stuff, and about breeds and feed and all that. But unfortunately, it was like March of 2020. Pandemic happened, so unfortunately, we ended up having to close the in-person programming with the school, and I actually ended up having to drive back home here to Seattle. But I wanted to continue with that momentum because I was really excited about raising pigs and starting to get hands-on experience with my own animals. And so luckily I'd known a couple of farmers up in the Sammamish Valley who had raised pigs in the past. So I was able to consult with my friends and another organization in the Valley, 21 Acres. I was lucky enough to know the farm manager there, Anthony Reyes, and I was able to work out an agreement with them where I was able to lease some of their farmland that they weren't using, and I was able to I bought a couple of feeder pigs off of Craigslist, and I was able to raise 4 pigs that year in my first year. I think summer of 2020, I believe it was. And that sort of rolled into me another, that's how I met Ray as well and got involved with the Black Farmers Collective. Longer story, but it was just an extension of my research project at Sterling.
Awesome. Well, you ready to move to the next work of art?
I am.
Do it.
All right. So yes, this painting is called The Drive of Swine, Evening Effect by Ludwig Naus, I believe it's pronounced. And I guess I'll go over like a quick visual analysis of what stands out to me, what I saw in the painting. So the main aspect or the main element in this painting that really stood out to me is just the way that light is used, I guess. I think you can see that here. I guess we'll start up high above. So in the top aspects of the painting, we have the sort of the human culture. You can see the buildings in the background, and like what I imagine, I guess, would be like really nice manicured pastures where perhaps they're keeping sheep and pigs and their dairy cows near the barns. And I can see how that upper portion of the painting is just like bathed in light. And I guess that's highlighting the human culture. But as we move our eyes down through the painting, you can see the drove of swine, the herd of swine that's down lower and sort of bathed or shrouded in the shadows. And amongst like the brushlands, the scrublands, where it's less manicured, seems to be less taken care of by the humans. You see like the dead gnarled old tree. So that sort of just highlighted to me like that dichotomy of light and dark, and sort of like high and low humans and lowly animals, lowly pigs. So that's what stood out to me. And I guess sort of like extrapolating a little bit from that, I thought about how, I guess more so historically, like pigs have been thought of as to be a lowly, dirty animal that doesn't have like many values or virtues other than the meat that they produce. and sort of seen as like a taboo in different cultures, different religions. And so yeah, there's sort of that juxtaposition of the lowly pig and the higher human culture aspects of it. Yeah, and I guess I did a little bit of, I took a few art history classes and I was going to community college, and some of my favorite classes. So I think I did a little art history sleuthing and tried to find some points that I could make about the artist, in particular Ludwig Noss, and just that talks a bit about the style of the painting. So Ludwig Noss, he was an artist, a German artist, and part of the Dusseldorf school in Germany, which overall the school is known for painting with the dark scenes and like really heavy colors, or like bold colors. And we can sort of see that with the dark and the light here in this painting. And I think Ludwig Noss in particular was known for that dark painting and heavy in color. And I saw a few of his older paintings, and you can definitely see that expressed in those. But as we look at this one, and let me rewind a bit, he remedied that by studying some of the Paris schools in 1852. So this is painted in 1878, so it's a bit after his dark and heavy color period. So I think he's got a good happy medium of the colors and the darkness. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah. And I will zoom out to make, I guess, another larger point about sort of tangential to this dichotomy of like seeing the lowly swineherd. Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's another point. Yeah, the higher land and the lower land. Thank you, Gail, for saying that. And yeah, I guess actually take a quick tangent off of that point too, as well. That the pigs they're in this lower land, which is more scrub land and like brushy. You can tell by like it's all bushes and a harder land. And like, so I guess looking at that from like a agroecological lens, the way that informed my first raising of the pigs at 21 acres at their farm was that we use the pigs as a sort of like ecological clearing method to get to sort of I don't want to say attack, but yeah, to attack some of the invasive species that were growing on the farm. There's reed canary grass in particular. And we're able to do that because pigs have a very heavy impact on the land. Anyway, some of their natural ways of being are they dig and they'll root around a lot. So they'll dig, like they'll use their noses like shovels. Their noses are very strong and super sensitive. So they'll use their noses to shovel and like dig out clumps, dig out holes, dig out wallows. And so we sort of use that action to help eradicate or to help disturb some of the invasive species that have been growing on the farm. And so like, I think that's just a little agroecological tangent that I mentioned that I would like to mention. Pigs are useful as for clearing land as well. But anyway, back to my larger point, I think is as coming to more of like a modern. Sorry, I'm looking at these questions too. Bondage on the pigs. Not. Sorry, this is to Dakota's question. I don't really think see any bondage on pigs that I've used personally. One thing that comes to mind, is actually nose rings. I think in some more commercial production and larger scale production of pig and pork. Farmers will put nose rings on the hogs, and that is to discourage the behavior that I was just talking about, the rooting. I think some farmers will put nose rings on the hogs to sort of preserve, if they're raising them outside, to preserve their pasture, so that they don't create holes and wallows. But other than that, I don't think there's any way or any other bondage that has been on pigs, other than maybe pet pigs and taking them for a walk on a harness. But
and Masra, it sounds like Dakota asked if she could say something. So sure, Dakota, if you want to unmute and share an observation, or we'd love to hear it. All right, I see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you if you are speaking, Dakota. So feel free, if you're unable to add. Yeah, feel free to send it in the chat if you're having trouble with your microphone, but we would like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dakota. And one thing I'll just point out really quickly that I noticed for the first time in this piece is that there is actually what appears to be a figure and maybe a dog right there.
Oh, I haven't seen the dog, but
maybe a dog. Yeah.
Oh,
but just interesting in the way that we're focusing on light and dark and kind of analyzing these hierarchies, and then having this little second edition also kind of tucked away in the shadows.
Yeah, it's a good eye. Yeah. I noticed the human, but I didn't make out the dog. But now that you pointed out, I think it might be like a border collie or something. But
and is that nice. A common animal to kind of round up the animals on the farm?
Yes, definitely. I don't know much. I've never had a dog, but I know border collies are. Yeah, it's a very characteristic herding dog. More so for like sheep and cattle, I think. But yeah, I'm slowly getting interested in working dogs as well. But yeah, awesome. So yeah, I guess I can take a little tangent or a little zoom out from my point about like the low-high dichotomy of humans seeing pigs as lowly animals, not carrying too much virtue, with how do I format this thought? Something that I guess stood out to me while learning about the larger meat industry while I was attending school in Kentucky, that I think a lot of people know about now these days, is that like the meat packing industry and the slaughter industry is so consolidated and so industrialized at this point in the U.S. And in a lot of other countries as well. Is that like sort of just something that I fathomed was like hogs and like lean hogs specifically are like almost somehow treated as like an investment instrument. So like hogs are traded on the stock market and then in market futures. I don't know too much about it, but that's just the point that stood out to me. I was like, well, that's pretty. It's kind of crazy when you sit back and think about it. How this farm animal that has been with humans for so long has been scaled up to such a size where it's actually like they're digital futures now, financial futures, I guess. But with that, I guess I can see sort of a little bit of parallels with like the historical disdain of like higher class people looking down on hogs and pigs and pork, to now having them relegated to be a commodity, such a big and valuable commodity for the global market, and how they're how they're being raised and processed and bred in these facilities in the Midwest and in CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, then just really systematize, industrialize, and maximize production and growth and all of those capitalist motivated outcomes and goals, I guess. And then they're sent to meatpacking plants, which follow on that same system of prioritizing speed and production. And yeah, sort of one thing that stood out to me is just like, with this consolidation and commodification, there's been a loss of, like, I guess, respect for the spirit of the animal, respect for the spirit of the workers, or in particularly who are working in the meatpacking plants, which are I think the majority of the front line, like just meatpacking workers who are on the line doing the cutting and doing the processing. I believe it's mostly BIPOC individuals, mostly Hispanic and black people who are doing the front line, working the most dangerous working conditions in the meatpacking process. And yeah, just something to fathom for me is that the speed and the amount of hogs that are processed per day, per hour. I did a little bit of research about this, and in an article, I think, and it's changed in the past couple of years actually, but I think last administration actually took off some of the caps, some of the federally regulated caps for like how fast you can process a hog on the line. But right now I believe it's about at like 1,106 hogs per hour is like how many hogs you're allowed to move through a line so fast, which is just seems crazy to me, but yeah. Anyway, that was just like a little tangential thought, but and a little bit depressing thought, but it's good to bring things down to reality. Yeah, I guess that's just something to fathom for me, is just like the ways that pigs and hogs have been commodified. Yeah, and then sort of to turn away, or to turn towards some lighter points. I think that I feel like the general cultural consensus around pigs has been changing for the better, I believe. I think it's wider knowledge now that people know that pigs are, like, in fact, really, really smart animals, and they're super clever and funny and happy and all that good stuff. But they're also actually, like, contrary to some old views of them, they're actually pretty clean animals given the right conditions, and they have a lot of discerning ways that they show that. For example, if when I raise them on pasture, they'll pick out their spots to poop and pee to distribute their waste, and they'll do it far away from wherever they're usually fed. So, and yeah, they're pretty clean. And I think I guess I want to turn our attention towards like the burgeoning small farm economy, where people are raising pigs on the smaller pasture raised scale, which overall provides healthier pigs, happier pigs, and healthier meat as well, for the people who consume it. And that are also, like, sort of highlighting some of these old genetic lines, that have sort of been lost through the industrialization, through the commercialization of pigs, which has just sort of resulted in a few specific breeds that have been over generations perfected perfected to perform in an industrialized system, in the CAFO system. And yeah, it's good to see farms like myself and farmers like raising more breeds, or breeds from the old times. And I don't know too much about this, so I'm gonna not speak as an authority on it, but yeah, I think
Masra, would now be a good time to show some of the photos that you have of your pigs. Great. Okay, I'll just start. I'll go one at a time, and you can just let me know when you are ready to move to the next one. And I want to say thanks to really great conversations happening in the chat that are resonating with what you're saying as well. So let's look at some pictures.
Ooh, awesome. Yeah. So I have a few pictures, and these are actually of my first year of raising pigs. I only had 4 this year. That year, I raised also some last year, a larger group of 10 to 15. But these are I guess the ones that are dearest to my heart. I actually named this group of 4 just because it was my first experience with them, and I believe this was Ruby Rose, and yeah. I couldn't see if I can remember the breed, but these were a cross of Duroc, Hereford, and Hampshire, I believe, which are old heritage breeds. And yeah, and I really liked actually. I think there might have been only Duroc Hampshire, but no, Duroc Hereford, excuse me. And I actually really enjoy the visual look of the Hereford breed. It's actually they're reddish and have white colorations as well, and it's actually also a breed of cattle which share the same color characteristics. But yeah, and this was Ruby Rose. I think we can move on to the next one, Caroline, please. And this was May, we called her. She was the one with the most personality that first year. Very vocal, unique vocal intonations. She was kind of annoying sometimes, but it's all good. And we named her May because we got the first batch on the 1st of May that first year. And I think this was also Ruby Rose, and just enjoying a mud pit, as you can see. And I guess a fun fact about pigs, maybe not fun fact, but pigs don't sweat. So the way they stay cool is through panting like dogs, but also if you give them access to a wallow, which is like a mud pit, they'll roll around in that, and to get a little protection from the sun, and to cool them down with the cool soil that they've dug into. And yeah, this is one of my favorite photos actually of them. They were just chilling, sleeping in their shelter there. And yeah, I really like this photo. And another, I guess, small point is that from the painting, actually, you can see that some of the pigs are actually like sort of in this doing what pigs do, laying all over each other, rolling around, and sort of just stepping on each other, which is what they do sometimes. And you can sort of see some of this right here. You can actually the one up there is sort of like the more blonde one who's on top of the other pig. That was Maxwell, we call him. And yeah, I think that's
Well, thank you, Masra. We are at a point where I'd love to open it up if some folks have questions, maybe about your work or about artworks in general. I will also join you on screen. But one thing I did really notice that I appreciated is I love that we can show your images because they are filled with love and care in a way that you're connecting with the animals. And I just wonder from your perspective, Masra, do you see, when you're looking at kind of those more formal paintings, do you see a sense of respect and love, or how do you kind of interpret the feeling associated with those images?
I think I do a little bit with particularly, I guess, the Drive of Swine, the evening effect painting. A little bit just with like looking at the human, I think, in the background. Sort of, you obviously can't really tell their facial expression or what they're thinking too much of it, but I would like to think that they're looking down affectionately at the pigs. I know I focus a lot on that sort of low high dark light dichotomy, but other than that, I don't see like any too much of a disdainful sense in the painting. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just curious, so I jumped in there. We do have a question from Harriet. So just kind of out loud, maybe you have an answer to this. I wonder if there are BIPOC visual artists who are creating new vistas of animal husbandry scapes. I don't know that answer, but that's a really great question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. I am not aware of any, actually, 'cause I'm not I wouldn't call myself an art buff, so I may not be the best authority on that, but
well, now we'll all start looking for those.
Exactly.
And I will, there's just been some great talk about kind of like this dichotomy between industrialization and kind of these more like idyllic landscapes. And for those of you that aren't super familiar with the Frye Art Museum Collection, something interesting is that the Fryes actually made their money through meat packing. So they kind of owned these very big industrial spaces. It allowed them to purchase art and to make their collection. But it's also very interesting that there was a lot of focus on animals and kind of that separation of these paintings being a little bit more, I would say, idyllic in their picture, and then also in human nature, animal culture. The exhibition, we have some of the archival material, and you see some images of these plants and that complete removal of the animal itself. It becomes more of a process. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about the Frye collection as well. So we have a couple more minutes, and I will see if there are any questions in the chat. Otherwise, you are welcome to unmute yourself and share a question if you have one. Yes, Harriet, they're images created by white artists. Yeah, the two that we looked at today for sure as well.
Hi, this is Ray from Black Farmers Collective.
Hi, Ray.
I guess I'm Masra's boss in some ways, though we certainly are a collective, and we value his work on Small Axe Farm. I just want to say, hey, this is a great job, very interesting. You know, I see Masra driving a tractor, spraying the pigs, planting and harvesting, but I don't see him as an art critic and a historian. So it's great to see that side of you. So thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the Frye for supporting this. This is really cool. So great.
And thank you, Ray. I had a really fun time working with both Ray and Masra, going through the exhibition and talking about this interesting overlap that we have. So If we don't have any more questions, we will end our program today. So thank you so much to Masra, to Black Farmers Collective, and to all of you for joining us and giving us this unique opportunity to use art almost as a launching point to talk about our community, to talk about different areas of research. So it was a lot of fun for us. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And